Hello, and welcome to another video from the YouTube channel, From Religion to Agnostic. Okay everyone, this is where the lineage of the biblical characters go wacky. Don't add up, if you get my drift. So I might mention, please don't take my word for it, do study this out on your own, as well as the documentary hypothesis. All we have that I could find says, yes, I looked in Jewish and Gnostic texts for any info on Lamech. Christian sources. Lamech is a person in Cain's genealogy in the 4th chapter of the book of Genesis. He is a 6th-generation descendant of Cain, Genesis 4:18, his father was named Methuselah, and he was responsible for the Song of the Sword, which I will mention at the end. He is also noted as the first polygamist mentioned in the Bible, taking 2 wives, Adah and Zillah. Coincidentally, this Lamech is distinguished from the other Lamech mentioned subsequently in Genesis 5:25 through 5:28, who was a descendant of Adam's third son Seth. More on that Lamech in due time. So in speaking of Lamech, Cain's line, the text states, sandwiched between 2 genealogical lines, the passage describing Lamech, son of Methuselah, descendant of Cain and his children is fairly substantive. 19 And Lamech took unto him 2 wives, the name of the one was Adah, and the name of the other Zillah. 20 And Adah bare Jabal, he was the father of such as dwell in tents, and of such as have cattle. 21 And his brother's name was Jubal, he was the father of all such as handle the harp and organ. 22 And Zillah, she also bare Tubal-Cain, an instructor of every artificer in brass and iron, and the sister of Tubal-Cain was Naamah. 23 And Lamech said unto his wives, Adah and Zillah, hear my voice, ye wives of Lamech, hearken unto my speech, for I have slain a man to my wounding, and a young man to my hurt. 24 If Cain shall be avenged 7-fold, truly Lamech 70 and 7-fold. Genesis 4:19 through 24. There are various suggestions of the correct translations for the names. When fully translated, the text resembles mythology concerning the origin of the various forms of civilization, the shepherds and musicians being products of the day, and pleasure being a product of the night. Blacksmiths, in carrying out their trade, are also associated with the darkness. Lamech could be interpreted as a culture hero. Some speculate the names demonstrate punning, Jabal, Jubal, and Tubal rhyme, and possibly derive from the same root JBL, YVL in modern Hebrew, to bring forth, also, to carry. A similar description existed amongst Phoenicians. The names are instead interpreted in the Midrash as an attack on polygamy. Adah is there interpreted as the deposed one, implying that Lamech spurned her in favor of Zillah, whose own name is understood to mean she shaded herself from Zillah at Lamech's side. The Midrash consequently regards Adah as having been treated as a slave, tyrannized by her husband, who was at the beck and call of his mistress, Zillah. It further goes on to claim that part of the immorality, which had led God to flood the earth, was the polygamy practiced by Lamech and his generation. The rabbinical tradition is just as condemning of Naamah. While a minority, such as Abba ben Kahana, see Naamah as having become Noah's wife, and being so named because her conduct was pleasing to God, the majority of classical rabbinical sources consider her name to be due to her singing pleasant songs in worship of idols. The pedigree assigned to Lamech in the Genesis genealogies bears similarities to that given for Lamech, father of Noah, and it has been suggested that they represent different versions of the same original pedigree. In Jewish sources, the descendant of Cain, Genesis 6:18 through 24. He had 2 wives, Adah and Zillah. Adah bore him 2 sons, Jabal, the father of such as dwell in tents. Remember this for later, it is important, those who dwell in tents, and Jubal, the father of such as handle the harp and organ. Zillah had 1 son, Tubal-Cain, instructor of those that wrought in brass and iron, and 1 daughter, named Naamah. Lamech is especially remembered for the address to his 2 wives given in Genesis 6:23 and 24. The general opinion of modern scholars is that this utterance is a glorification by Lamech of the weapons forged by his son Tubal-Cain, while Wellhausen holds, Die Composition de Hexateuch, page 305, that it is simply a boastful outburst of the kind common in Arabic literature. The Talmudists and the ancient Jewish commentators, interpreting the words, Genesis 6:15, Cain shall expiate his crime after 7 generations, evolved the following legend: Lamech lost his sight and had to be led by his son Tubal-Cain, who was of the 7th generation from Cain, comp Genesis 6:17 and 18. One day Tubal-Cain saw in the distance something that he took for an animal. It was Cain, however, who had been killed by an arrow from Lamech's bow. When they found that it was Cain, Lamech in sorrow clapped his hands together, by which action he killed Tubal-Cain. His wives deserted him, Rashi, ad Loc. According to Genesis 23:5, Lamech killed no one, but his wives refused to associate with him on the ground that the descendants of Cain would be destroyed after 7 generations. Lamech, however, allayed their fears, saying, "Have I slain a man or a youth that my offspring should be destroyed? If Cain shall expiate his crime after 7 generations, surely Lamech, who killed no one, shall expiate his sins after 77 generations." This interpretation was adopted by Onkelos and Pseudo-Jonathan. Josephus saw in the word 77 the number of Lamech's sons. 2 Descendant of Seth and father of Noah, Genesis 5:28-30, whom Lamech begot at the age of 182 years, his life covered a period of 777 years. The coincidence of the names, Lamech, and Enoch, in the Cainite and Sethite genealogies, as well as the similarity between other names in the 2 lists, has led modern scholars to suppose that these are 2 different recensions of the same list. Okay, so now we looked at Christian and Jewish sources on Lamech, Cain's line, but let's just take a moment. I want to scroll back up a few lines to where it mentions, the pedigree assigned to Lamech in the Genesis genealogies bears similarities to that given for Lamech, father of Noah, and it has been suggested that they represent different versions of the same original pedigree. Let's look at the Genesis genealogies. Notice it plural meaning more than one. Red flag, anyone? The genealogies of Genesis provide the framework around which the book of Genesis is structured. Beginning with Adam, genealogical material in Genesis 4, 5, 10, 11, 22, 25, 29-30, 35-36, and 46 move the narrative forward from the creation to the beginnings of Israel's existence as a people. Adam's lineage in Genesis contains 2 branches, chapter 4 giving the descendants of Cain, and chapter 5 that for Seth that is then continued in later chapters. Chapter 10 gives a table of nations that records the populating of the earth by Noah's descendants, and is not strictly a genealogy but an ethnography. Genesis 5 and 11 include the age at which each patriarch had the progeny named as well as the number of years he lived thereafter. Many of the ages given in the text are implausibly long, but could have been considered modest in comparison to the ages given in other works, for instance, the Sumerian king list. The ages include patterns surrounding the numbers 5 and 7, for instance the 365-year life of Enoch, the same as the number of full calendar days in a solar year, and the 777-year life of Lamech, repetitional emphasis of the number 7. Overall, the ages display clear mathematical patterns, confirming that number symbolism was used to construct them. Nevertheless, since Genesis 5 and 11 provide the age of each patriarch at the birth of his named descendant, it also appears to present a gapless chronology from Adam to Abraham, even if the named descendant is not always a first-generation son. I also want to point out as well, 3 versions of the Genesis genealogy exist: the Hebrew Masoretic text, the Greek Septuagint, and the Samaritan Pentateuch. Translations from the Masoretic text are preferred by Western Christians, including Roman Catholics and Protestants, and by followers of Orthodox Judaism, whereas the Greek version is preferred by Eastern Christians, including Eastern Orthodox, Coptic, Ethiopic, Jacobite and Armenian. The Samaritan version of the Pentateuch is used mainly by the Samaritans. What strike me here, big red flag, warning, 3 versions of the Genesis genealogy exist: the Hebrew Masoretic text, the Greek Septuagint, and the Samaritan Pentateuch. So now the question stems, which one of the 3 are the truth, if any? Let's move on. There is so much more here to unravel, but for the sake of time and to not take you down that rabbit hole to another rabbit hole, we will stay the course, and as I mentioned earlier, let's look at the Song of the Sword. The last part of the account of Lamech, Genesis 4:23 and 24, takes the form of a brief poem, which refers back to the curse of Cain. In the poem, Lamech's stance resembles that of a supreme warrior, able to avenge himself absolutely. However, no explanation of who Lamech supposedly killed is ever given in the Tanakh. Some scholars have proposed that it is connected to the invention, contextually by Tubal-Cain, of the sword, for which reason the poem is often referred to as the Song of the Sword. The poem may originate from the mysterious book of the Wars of the Lord, though the greater context for it is likely to remain obscure. However, this paucity of context did not stop a rabbinical tradition growing up around it. The Talmud and Midrash present an extensive legend, told, for example, by Rashi, in which Lamech first loses his sight from age, and had to be led by Tubal-Cain, the seventh generation from Cain. Tubal-Cain saw in the distance something that he first took for an animal, but it was actually Cain, still alive, due to the extensive lifespan of the antediluvians, whom Lamech had accidentally killed with an arrow. When they discovered who it was, Lamech, in sorrow, clapped his hands together, accidentally striking and killing Tubal-Cain. In consequence, Lamech's wives desert him. A similar legend is preserved in the pseudepigraphic second book of Adam and Eve, chapter 13. In this version Tubal-Cain is not named, but is instead referred to as the young shepherd. After Lamech claps his hands, he strikes the young shepherd on the head. To ensure his death, he then smashed his head with a rock. An alternate form of this negative attitude towards Lamech, such as Targum Pseudo-Jonathan, claims that even though Lamech did not kill anyone, his wives refused to associate with him and denied him sex, on the grounds that Cain's line was to be annihilated after 7 generations. The poem is then given by Lamech to allay their fears. Other classical sources, such as Josephus, see the word 77 as the number of sons which Lamech eventually had. Extending on this classical view of Lamech is the Book of Moses, regarded in Mormonism as scripture. According to this Latter-day Saint text, Lamech entered into a secret pact with Satan, as had Cain before him, becoming a second master Mahan. When Irad, an ancestor of Lamech, learned his secret and began to publicize it, Lamech murdered him. News of the murder was spread by Lamech's 2 wives, leading to his being cast out of society. Well, that will do it for this video. Have a great day, and be safe. If you enjoyed this video, please think about subscribing, as well as hitting the like and sharing would help out a lot. Thank you all. Peace out, y'all.